At its end in 1945, World War II had become the most destructive event in human history. Over 60 million people perished. Countries left in total ruin. Most nations had been so economically and morally depleted that a vacuum would soon be filled by the only two nations that would emerge as superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. These were the only governments left with the financial and spiritual resources to bring some form of leadership to the world. These two great nations could not have been more dissimilar in their ideology and future vision of the world. The U.S. assumed the leadership of the free world, spreading the gospel of democracy and capitalism. The Soviets were dedicated to the philosophies of communism. During the next 45 years, the Soviets and the U.S. squared off in a battle of ideology, military dominance, and global political power. Fueled by stockpiles of nuclear bombs and missile technology, both superpowers became embroiled in a hectic battle for supremacy. This would be known as the Cold War. It would prove to be one of the most politically unstable and potentially devastating eras of modern human history. The U.S. assured its allied nations that they were secure under the protective blanket of American technology. Sure, the Soviets had the bomb, but their lack of technology prevented them from effectively delivering it. This would all change on October 4th, 1957. The Russians would stun the world with Sputnik 1 into orbit, the world's first artificial satellite aboard a secret Soviet rocket. Sputnik 1 changed the political balance of the world overnight. The Soviets had made their point. They controlled the high ground now, not the Americans. Sputnik could have just as easily been a nuclear weapon waiting to be dropped anywhere on the U.S., and we had no way to stop it. Before the Americans could react, the Soviets launched Sputnik 2, a satellite weighing just over 1,100 pounds and carrying the first living object into orbit, a small dog named Laika. Desperate to meet the Soviet challenge, the United States hurried their diminutive Vanguard rocket to the launch pad, tipped with the tiny 3-pound grapefruit-sized satellite named Vanguard 1. It wasn't much, but at least we could show the world we were ready to take on the Soviets in this great technological battle. As the world watched, the countdown proceeded, and then the button was pushed. It was embarrassment number 3 for the Americans. Finally, in late January 1958, the U.S. finally placed a satellite named Explorer 1 into low Earth orbit. At only 22 pounds, Explorer wasn't much to brag about, but at least we had something on the scoreboard and the great space race was on. Over the next few years, the space race quickly ramped up, each country trying to up the other in the scoreboard of space firsts. In April 1961, it was clear which nation was in the lead. It was the voice of the first human in space, and he had a distinctive Russian accent. A 27-year-old Red Air Force pilot would make a single orbit of the Earth. The Russians had put their name on the ultimate space first. The Cold War was heating up. A huge arms race between the U.S. and the Soviets was placing the world on the brink of a World War III. The weapon of choice? The nuclear bomb. The world saw what these weapons could do after the U.S. dropped 2 atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end the war. Tens of thousands of its inhabitants were vaporized. The weapon of a choice was the nuclear bomb. A weapon of unimaginable power and destruction. The world saw firsthand what these weapons could do when the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is the American Mark VI warhead, one of the largest thermonuclear devices ever developed. It was built to ride the tip of the giant Titan II rocket, also displayed here. At detonation, this bomb had the explosive power equal to more than 600 times the Hiroshima bomb. And we did not have just one. Over 1,000 of these weapons were aimed at cities and targets in the Soviet Union. And the Russians had an equal number pointed right back at us. Such was the fear and paranoia we all lived in during the Cold War. One false move by either side and all of the missiles would have been released with the obvious consequences of destruction of the world. President Kennedy made a bold move to defuse this tension. In May 1961, Kennedy went before Congress and challenged the Soviets to a race to the moon. No technology existed that would have allowed either country to achieve such an audacious goal. But that was what Kennedy was banking on.
The dramatic achievements in space which occurred in recent weeks should have made clear to us all, as did the Sputnik in 1957, the impact of this adventure on the minds of men everywhere who are attempting to make a determination of which road they should take. Since early in my term, our efforts in space have been under review. With the advice of the Vice President, who is Chairman of the National Space Council, we have examined where we are strong and where we are not, where we may succeed and where we may not. Now it is time to take longer strides, time for a great new American enterprise, time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement, which in many ways may hold the key to our future on Earth. I believe we possess all the resources and talents necessary, but the facts of the matter are that we have never made the national decisions or marshaled the national resources required for such leadership. We have never specified long-range goals on an urgent time schedule or managed our resources and our time so as to ensure their fulfillment. I therefore ask the Congress, above and beyond the increases I have earlier requested for space activities, to provide the funds which are needed to meet the following national goals. First, I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish. In conclusion, let me emphasize one point. It is not a pleasure for any President of the United States, as I'm sure it was not a pleasure for my predecessor, to come before the Congress and ask for new appropriations which place burdens on our people. I came to this conclusion with some reluctance. But in my judgment, this is a most serious time in the life of our country and in the life of freedom around the globe. And it is the obligation, I believe, of the President of the United States to at least make his recommendations to the members of the Congress so that they can reach their own conclusions with that judgment before them. You must decide yourselves as I have decided. And I am confident that whether you finally decide in the way that I have decided or not, that your judgment, as my judgment, is reached on what is in the best interests of our country.
He knew that out of national and political pride, both countries would have to divert a significant amount of their financial resources and brainpower away from the arms race and focus on getting to the moon. In Kennedy's mind, it was the far better option. The path to the moon pushed the limits of both nations to their brink, and the technological challenges at times seemed impossible. To get to the moon, two of the greatest and most critical challenges that had to be overcome were spacewalking and extravehicular activity, and rendezvous, navigating two spacecrafts together to a single point in space. Using their small pathfinding two-person spacecraft named Gemini, NASA found the way to launch a mission every 2 months. On December 15th of 1965, the U.S. launched Gemini 6 with the crew of Wally Schirra and Tom Stafford. Their primary goal was to perform the first rendezvous in space with another craft, a procedure that was paramount in getting humans to the moon. rendezvousing two spacecraft, each flying at over 17,000 miles per hour. Stafford and Shearer's original rendezvous target was to be an unmanned Agena target vehicle, but it exploded shortly after launch. The pressure to have the Americans log this important space first was so great that NASA made an unprecedented move. They removed Stafford and Shearer's Gemini 6 spacecraft and Titan rocket from the launch pad, and in its place, erected and launched Gemini 7 crew of Frank Borman and Jim Lovell on an extended 2-week mission. Immediately, launch crews re-erected the Gemini 6 vehicle and launched Stafford and Shearer off of the same pad just 8 days later, a record that still stands today. Stafford and Shearer would begin their chase of Gemini 7, conducting complex orbital maneuvers never before attempted. On their fourth orbit, Gemini 7 came into view, and for the next few hours, Stafford and Shearer would skillfully pilot their spacecraft within just a foot of the other crew. And Tom Stafford would take some of the most memorable photos in the history of space exploration. The world's first space rendezvous had finally been achieved, and this time, it was the Americans that had done it. It all came together 40 years ago in July 1975. Welcome to the Apollo-Soyuz 40th anniversary